I want to discuss stress because stress is something that is misunderstood. And in the clinic yesterday, again and again, just explaining what stress does to the body because it does create very structured signs and symptoms. You should not think that it is random things like random herbs or adding things to your formula structures to try and treat stress. Stress creates very structured signs and symptoms that can be easily understood. So if you take the example of a glass, if you had a glass, you drop the glass and it cracks. Stress is basically applying pressure to those cracks. It puts pressure on the weaknesses in the body. Depending on where the weaknesses is, if there's a nervous system disorder, a circulatory system problem, or digestive issues, or organ functioning problem, depending on where your weaknesses is, stress will aggravate those areas. It will put pressure on your weaknesses and manifest very structured signs and symptoms. Because what stress does, it causes blood vessels to vasoconstrict. So imagine that the width and diameter of a vessel is meant to be at this. When there is stress, it causes it to vasoconstrict. And when a blood vessel vasoconstricts, it inhibits the movement of warm blood. And organs, all parts of the body, it requires blood for function. And if you inhibit the blood, it inhibits the function. And just yesterday, I saw 6 patterns just from stress, and they all created very different signs and symptoms depending on where those weaknesses are, from infertility to headaches and migraines to diarrhea with abdominal pain. It will always go to very specific parts of the body, and that is why there is a formula called Sinisan, which is translates as cold reversal formula. That is why it has very random signs and symptoms if you don't understand that inhibiting the blood creates very structured signs and symptoms, because it is firstly described in what they call the Shaoyin chapter, which is again another TCM concept to try and theoretically explain how to use a herb, which is incorrect. You should identify primary and second indications to understand individual herbs and formula structures. But why it's in the Shaoyin lines, some people, I don't think, even understand, people that actually use theoretical concept to prescribe herbs, because Shaoyin just means the movement of warm blood in through the lower pelvis. It is the movement of warm blood in through the kidneys and small intestine. But what it really means is knowing that when the heart pumps the blood, there is a large part of that blood that moves into the small intestine, so from the top to the bottom. And if there is vasoconstriction of the blood vessels, it inhibits the movement of blood. And again, if you inhibit the movement of blood, it affects the natural function. And that is why it has descriptions in that line for that formula like diarrhea and frequent urination, because when there is blood that is inhibited to the small intestine, the gas cools down, it cannot warm the fluids. And if you do not warm the fluids, cold fluid either goes to the bladder or it goes to the bowel. So you can manifest frequent urination, or you can manifest watery loose stools with abdominal pain. All these types of signs and symptoms is very easy to understand, because knowing that if blood is inhibited to an area, it will create very structured signs and symptoms. Another indication in that formula is palpitations, because knowing that the heart is a pump and it pumps the blood through the blood vessels, the pipes. So if the piping or the blood vessels vasoconstrict, the diameter contracts, it puts pressure back on the pump, increases the heart rate. When you increase the heart rate, you can get anxiety and palpitations. If you use this formula correctly, it alleviates the contraction, takes the pressure off the heart rate slows down, and the anxiety and palpitations clear. Also, there is coughs. Cough is because there's a herb in Sinisan called Chahu, and it has responsive discomfort under the costals. It basically locks the diaphragm and lungs up. And basically that's why you get shortness of breath and cough. There is the indication of cold fingers and toes. Basically the organs always have to remain a certain temperature, and when there is stress, it causes the blood vessels to vasoconstrict and it inhibits the movement of blood to the extremities. So you get cold fingers and toes, and that's why people with stress very easily get tight neck and nape and tightness and stiffness and headaches and migraines, because when blood is inhibited to that area, fluids cool down, and when fluids cool down, they contract and cause pain. It's very simple. Understand that stress basically affects what those weaknesses are. So if it is a constitutional weakness, so for example, if your parents or grandparents have heart problems, stress will cause contraction. The blood vessels put pressure on the heart. If there is lifestyle problems or dietary eating patterns where you eat too quickly, too late at night, if you eat the wrong foods, if you eat too much food, it will cause a bowel obstruction, and then stress will basically cause contraction, inhibit more movement of blood, which will cause abdominal pain and bloating and digestive problems. It's very simple. Just know that when you are stressed, It causes the blood vessels to vasoconstrict. If you inhibit the movement of blood, it affects natural function. And as soon as a natural function is inhibited, the body will create very structured signs and symptoms. It will tell you what herbs are required to actually treat this presentation, to restore natural function. And that is why stress is something that is easy to understand and it is very easy to treat.